Snow at Heaven's Edge. Chapter 6. A torrent of snow blew toward the two travelers. The howling wind was the only sound in the frozen tundra. Frost whitened the brows and whiskers of the man. Deep snow slowed his steps. Neither was able to aid him further, for his heart was already heavy and weary. Wuniang was quiet as well, and Ma Xiande wondered what was happening within her mind, whether she was feeling his silent regret. How long ago was it? How long had it been? When was the last time he knelt before the statue of the enlightened one to pray? Was it on Mount Tai? Or was it on Mount Fengyun? Would there be forgiveness for what he had failed to do and what he vowed to accomplish? His memories were like the distant snowy path, a blur of whiteness. Only with much effort could he make them out, but they came back now as in a dream. Young Ma Xiande was a loud, boastful man with uncommon skills. No man was more able than him at the martial arts, and the government bestowed on him the title of martial scholar. This title was traditionally a second-rank post, but his was significantly lower, at 7th, on account of his humble beginnings. He was a careless and carefree young man who neither understood nor cared about formalities and official ranks, but he accepted the post. Popular opinion at the time was that the temptation of riches and power were too great, and even the wild Ma Xiande bended the knee to accept the lowly title. Only he knew his true ambition. Ma Xiande, for the first time, had dedicated his life to one person. His wandering days had come to an end, and he now wandered into her beauty, in her eyes, in her words, and in her world. He had professed his love under the heavens, beneath a canopy of stars that twinkled with delight as he half-whispered, half-stuttered those words. He remembered her irrepressible smile as she heard them. Even after 20 years, Ma Xiande could still recall that night, how the summer night chirped with lively cicadas, how the leaves rustled in the gentle breeze, and how the air was soft and warm, blanketing the pair tenderly as they kissed. Ma Wuniang's view was all that mattered now, and her mind was a clouded, troubled place. Each waking moment was a haze, a perpetual blizzard blown away the fabrics of reality until all that remained was a cold, barren soul. Her lips trembled, as if crying, as if whispering, but they were endlessly knitting curses upon curses on the man she married. In her mind, one singular image predominated over everything else, like the blinding brightness of the sun in the desert sky. There were happier times, of course, lingering deep in her memories, where her synapses obstinately refused to let go, was the former image of the brave warrior riding through a forest of spears, parting the ocean of blades to rescue her. That picture of a noble hero, a confident man, never yielded, but rather became enveloped by a thicket of pain, and to think it was her who caused it. Such was the curse of true love. Who knew when they had fallen victim to such madness? A lady from her lineage was no stranger to strong men, but Ma Xiande was everything and more. He became the standard for what she desired in a man. Once this seed planted itself in her mind, it grew as did her passion. The smoldering flame had become a rampant fire. Ma Xiande was so different. He spoke freely and honestly. He had never cared for useless Confucian conventions, but was never rude, mean, or base. While he was a man of violence, he was neither a brute nor a rogue. He had purpose, and Liao Wuniang sensed that too. To this day, sometimes, in her mumblings, an occasional curse would be laid upon herself for not finding out until it was too late. Like the image of her husband, forever immortalized in her mind, that day stood frozen in her memories. It was the 5th day of the 4th month, in the 7th year of the Mei regime under the new emperor. Her brother, Liao Nanying, stumbled into her room as they were still schoolchildren despite her being a married woman. Without putting down her needlework, she asked, "Wukong, what's the matter now?" He paused, face flushed. Though tall and muscular, Nanying had a round face and large detached ears that gave him a slight monkey-like appearance. He fought countless playmates over the sensitive subject in his childhood. Only one person could call him this without provoking an ounce of anger. The nickname when uttered from her lips was warm and playful. "Jie, it is the anniversary of Mother's death. Normally, we should go as a family to her grave, but because of the Western campaign..." "Understood," she said. And that was that. A man's duty was to the affairs of state, while a woman's was to her household. Ma Wuniang was a woman of few words. Even when trying to persuade her father to let her marry Ma Xiande, she had not spoken much, but had rather simply stated her affection for the man. "I love him, father," was her speech, and her forceful stare was her argument. Since her husband had left earlier in the morning for a routine survey of the barracks, Wuniang would be alone once her father and brother departed as well. What was the difference between here and the Liao cemetery? A house devoid of loved ones was not a home. "I'll go, but you and father must go to pay your respects once things are in short order. You know how much mother cared." Nanning nodded. The mother had been a kind woman, and some of that maternal instinct had passed on to Wuniang, though she differed in other ways. Wuniang was much stronger and fiery than her mother had ever been. "Could you stop by the Phoenix Inn to get you a bottle of monkey wine?" This time, it was no joke. The monkey wine of Phoenix Inn was known for its rich, fruity flavor and strongly potent content, exactly to Liao Nianying's liking. Wuniang asked her most trusted maid to remind her should she forget to stop by the inn for the liquor. She dressed and went to bid her father farewell before departing for the cemetery, never to imagine that the Liao Manor, 135 strong, could fall in the blink of an eye.
"No, that won't do," said Pao Xiang, barring the door with her body. "My friend has been gone for too long," Feng Xiaoyan said, and shot her an angry look. "And so has yours. You need not worry. Master Gao is a renowned swordsman. He promised he will return her to you, and he will." The young woman was only slightly older than Xiaoyan, but her poised mannerism suggested a lifetime of experience dealing with dangerous men and situations. Xiaoyan knew that Li Xiang was probably safer with the young man than running around with her. But could she trust him? She thought about returning to the inn to tell Ling Ruting, but she was afraid of encountering more soldiers. They were undoubtedly wanted by now. Pao Xiang looked at the troubled girl with an amused twinkle in her eyes. Xiaoyan wrapped a long scarf over her head and around her face. She was about to rise when Pao Xiang gently pushed her back into her chair and seated herself next to the girl. "If you keep staring like that, I'll make you look like me," snapped Xiaoyan. Pao Xiang smiled and gave Xiaoyan's hand a gentle squeeze. "Real beauty and attractiveness do not lie in your looks. That's because you're beautiful. So are the other girls here, but I am the most popular. True beauty comes from understanding and accepting yourself, knowing who you are. How does this change who you are?" "Don't touch me," Xiaoyan said angrily as she swatted away Pao Xiang's hand. "How selfish," exclaimed Pao Xiang in faint annoyance as she gave Feng Xiaoyan a cheeky grin. It was, of course, in jest, especially after seeing how passionate the girl was. She found it amusing to see the girl's face redden and her round almond eyes narrowing to a slit. Xiaoyan was very expressive. The two young women lived very different but equally abject lives. Feng Xiaoyan knew exactly what the Spring Flower Pavilion was despite never having set foot in it before today, and she knew what type of activities occurred within its high walls, luscious decor, and beautiful springtime gardens. Likewise, Pao Xiangyan knew not only of the name but also a bit of the story behind this peculiarly dressed and disfigured girl. The scar was worse than Pao Xiang had imagined, but at the same time she was glad that the girl in front of her was defiantly lively and reminded her of herself before the cruel, grueling training in the pleasure house broke her. She bit down gently on her lips to stop them from quivering. "Everyone thinks they know what pain is. I had a rich merchant pass by here once and told me the worst he's ever felt was when his supply wagon was attacked by bandits. He lost all his goods. There was no way he could return home to face his family or his peers. He sold what was left of his possessions to come here because he wanted to die happy. We sang and danced, and I entertained him. Soon I forgot about his worries, almost as if they weren't real, but he remembered. I did not find out until many months later that the goods he carried was part of the yearly imperial tributes." Xiaoyan knew, even without Pao Xiang explaining further. The merchant's life was forfeit regardless, but if he did not make a decent apology to the state, the lives of his family would be as well. That was how the system worked, and how the Mei government kept order. She had experienced it herself. When Lai Ye reached the far bank of the small brook, he saw a small clearing where only the faintest fire burned. There was a small camp for maybe 100 men. Reinforcement came early. They know, the government knows that he is here. If he went to them to give word, these men would mobilize. A faint smile crept across his face, making him look very infantile, like a child coming upon a mischievous scheme, except there was nothing innocent about his thoughts. Lai Ye rose and treaded across the snowy bank until he was close enough to the encampment to hear the crackling fire. He remained hidden behind a boulder. No sound of man or movement came from within the camp. He looked around, searching for signs of anything unusual, and found nothing except the salient silence. The heavy, sporadic snowfall covered the entire landscape with a beautifully eerie innocence. All was white and pure, and everything was quiet and calm. Lai Ye knew this was the northern land's biggest lie, a facade much like the way he presented himself. Death stalked the frozen landscape. He edged closer, preparing to declare himself as a constable of the second rank in the imperial city should guards discover him. Snow crunched under his feet. Each step he took was slow and cautious. His previously worthless life now had value, even if only in revenge. He entered a soldier's tent, empty. The next tent was as vacant as the previous. So was the third. He continued past countless more abandoned tents and dying campfires until he reached the heart of the encampment. The May banners flapped listlessly to the sporadic gusts of frozen wind. Inside the commander's tent, tables lay on their sides. Flasks, wine, and cups scattered like fallen soldiers across the floor, spilling their colored wine. Lai Ye went behind the screen, which separated the reception area from General Wei Qingren's personal space. Everything looked undisturbed. He shifted through the fur sheets and the chests of gold and clothing until he found a small, locked box which contained the commander's seal. Something was wrong. Leaving a seal of office was a dishonorable act. What caused the entire camp to leave in such a hurry? Where did they go? There were no bodies, no blood, no sign of combat. He ruminated over the possibilities, but consistently settled on one. It had to be. He witnessed the man's terrifying skill the prior night. Can one man do this? Of course he can. Lai Ye, you fool. He could feel his fallen comrades reprimanding him. Have you forgotten already? No, he murmured. Wuai had prevailed against greater odds. The monster was still alive while Lai Ye's school had crumbled and faded away, his martial brothers and sisters slain, like the moon against the stern gaze of the sun. It was not right. The man was a murderer. He looked up at the gray skies and despair overcame him. If this, he looked around at the empty camp surrounding him, cannot stop him, can you? He clutched his fists together, shoulders slumped, and his body shook with silent contempt. Righteousness will prevail. This is but a test. Had it not always been the principle of the White Sword sect to believe, to endure, to ultimately triumph? The truth shall be heard. Why must the compassionate, the kind, the strong, the brave, the innocent, the righteous suffer? No, that would not do. He must believe and have faith. He must do something. But what? Visions of the man drove daggers of fear into his body, reducing him to this shaken, convulsing mass. Even after perfecting his techniques, Lai Ye knew he would fall short of his ultimate goal. He dug deep into the darkest recess of his mind where no construct of humanity had ever made contact to find a way to defeat the invincible swordsman. They had traveled the vast extent of the empire in the past year, mostly keeping to themselves. Wuai had not anticipated trouble brewing in such a remote area, known more by name of its famous inn than its own. He should have known better. As long as there is life, there will be struggles and pain. Like the flow of time, this is inevitable. His body ached as he breathed, as he spoke, as he walked. Pain, like the scars, was a warning that he was flesh and bone. Even his indomitable will was wearing thin. Fatigue weighed on him more and more with each passing day, and his desire to find rest grew. He had hoped to find it on his travels. If anything, he was more fatigued, more troubled by all that he saw. Is it human nature? In faraway lands or in neighboring cities, people are the same. Whether for great or small, They are destined to fight. Conflicts are a byproduct of human existence, defined by it. Ruting saw his haggardness too. As his wife, she felt what he felt. They were connected by the same string. How can a tug upstream not affect her downstream? The inner turmoil was much greater this time, reverberating in his silent gestures and the ponderous subtleties of his gaze. "Can it be any other way?" she asked. He gave her a quizzical look, and she pointed to the peddler with a basket of coal. Two children with a bundle of firewood traversed the opposite side of the street. Substitute goods, Wuai thought. The coal seller screamed obscenities at the children and threatened to send them all to the village chief for stealing. He had a point. Not only was the wood cheaper than coal, they were selling it at a discount. After the children ran off, the hate and anger on the man's face disappeared, replaced by perhaps a set recognition that today's business might not go well. Half a bucket of coal remained, with most of his rounds finished by this time of day. An old thought returned to him and morphed his face into the familiar shape of disappointment and self-loathing. If only I were younger, faster. The tragedy and the blessing of the moment is its impermanence. Why should we be burdened by transience or permanence if we know the inevitable truths? As she said that, the outer corners of her lips curled into a tender smile. She wrapped her arm around his and rested her head on his shoulder as they walked. "There is only one truth that I know," he said, and smiled boyishly. "This must be heaven. Xiang, that girl. She must have run off again, but there is not much to do in this town, especially with this weather," spoke Ruting in a concerned voice. "Well, there is the spring flower pavilion that I've mentioned earlier." She gave him a look of both disbelief and shock. How is it that our hero Lin always speaks of such places? "Those are the first places I check out. Good food, warm bed, and great company." He placed extra emphasis on the latter. "You are a heartless man." "How can I not be? My heart has already been stolen." She tried but failed to suppress a smile, and her face glowed with happiness. She had, in her teenage years, wondered about, of all silly things, the reason she might love a man. Love this man. She had mentally listed an almost infinite number, so much so that she felt he could more than make up for her own shortcomings. Now, she wasn't sure whether there was a reason. One cannot explain love like an argument or a belief. That was the magic of it. Love, like a secret, when spoken aloud, loses its power. They came upon the famed food stand known for its ginger douhua. Ruting remembered Li Xiang's enthusiastic endorsement the night before. "Pardon us, master. Have you seen two girls, an adolescent and a 10-year-old? The owner stared blankly. Ruting repeated her question a second time. Like a man shaken off a dream, he finally was able to stutter. They ran off that way," he pointed. "But I suggest that you don't follow. Soldiers, for your safety, if you know what I mean." Ruting thanked the man. That filled her heart. She felt her husband's hand on her shoulder, and she knew what they had to do. Li Xiang would most likely first draw the pursuers away from her intended destination, the inn, and then return. That was how she was taught. "I'll head towards the western gate and search there. Would you mind waiting for me back at the inn?" He spoke those words sternly but calmly, and he finished it with a subtle smile which said, "Don't worry. It'll be all right." "Be careful," she tried to hold back those words, but they seemed to just roll off her tongue. He turned back, another smile, and a nod. She took a detour to explore the small streets and alleys. Maybe they're just hiding, too afraid to come out. She had hoped so, but deep beyond the logical faculties of her mind where instinct governed, she felt a warning of a danger not yet fully materialized. Whatever this threat was set her nerves ablaze with numbing cold. She felt fear. Hey, you've made it to the end. If you like it so far, please subscribe and like. This lets me know I'm on the right path. And if you can't wait for the next installment of Snow at Heaven's Edge, then head on over to Amazon and read the story in its entirety for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. Alternatively, you can check out Dreamweaver and Duo on Mount Taiyuan as well. Both of these stories are done and available for free here on YouTube, Spotify, and Audible. If you want to support me, please consider going to my Ko-fi and being a member. Have a great day.